end when you talked about Dwayne, when you talked about your educational viewpoint, that takes us into our next topic of just that education. We know as leaders, it's extremely important for us as adults to leave that legacy and have that impact. And before I jump into my depth of questions in education, which that's a in 30 years in education, we could talk about K-12 higher ed, the impact of community, the whole nine. What are your thoughts on the state of education today, pre-COVID, during COVID? And unfortunately, our president mentioned yesterday that we're past COVID. We're not, but now that we're coming out of this post-COVID era, what is the state of education in your thoughts as being inside and now working outside but still an educator at heart?
Well, that's a very interesting question because I know that when I was working on, as I said, I have two master's degrees, and both of them required me to do a little bit of study and research on the achievement gap. And I was amazed at how much of an achievement gap that exists between African Americans and Hispanics and whites and Southeast Asians. What I found out during that time is that our children were far underprepared for things anywhere between K and 12, and even as far as the undergraduate studies at most of our universities. So I made it a point to make sure that I would always do tutoring and do whatever I can to help them close the achievement gap. When COVID hit in 2019, okay, but it really hit in 2020, that gap widened to levels that were unimaginable. So right now, those individuals who are working as classroom teachers are facing almost an insurmountable a challenge to educate or close that achievement gap because a lot of these children, due to the absence of school or this so-called homeschooling or this so-called learning with computers at home or now even coming to school periodically, our children, African American children, who didn't even, some of them didn't even have internet services at their house for months during the school year, they're really falling behind. So I actually run a program for the Prince Hall Shriners. I'm in charge of mentoring programs called Shriners as Mentors, and I'm in charge of a program for the entire world. I am the Imperial Director of the Shriners as Mentors. Currently, I haven't been changed. We just had new elections in August, so I haven't been replaced yet officially, I guess. So I'm still in charge, but I have several guys, and we put on programs throughout the country where we try to get various shrine temples in every city that we're available to go to different schools, to go to the boys' clubs, to go to the police athletic leagues, to go to the YMCAs and initiate programs to engage our children, find out whether the children can read, find out whether they can do mathematics. You mentioned something about multiple intelligences. I read a book by Howard Gardner one time called Multiple Intelligence, and it talked about the 7 different intelligence levels or way children learn, or people learn, not just children. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that everybody doesn't learn the same way. So I try to instill in my people that look, everybody is not doesn't learn visually, and some people don't learn through audio approaches. Some people are tactile learners, and again, there's various ways to teach. But we have to make sure that at the end of the day, when a lesson is offered and is taught, that the children have grasped some concept of the lesson. If they haven't grasped the entire lesson, then we need to find out where the missing points are. Because as you understand, as an effective educator is the one that does an assessment at the end of their class. And I'm not talking about a written examination, but I used to always ask them I would have periods of reflection. And I would afford my students or anybody that came in my presence to ask them, what did you learn today that you didn't know when you came to school this morning? And I need you to verbalize and tell me what it is that you learned, because if you came to school and you didn't learn anything today, then we have a problem. So now, even as an adult, when I encourage other adults to go look in the mirror at the end of the evening when they go home and say, I want you to go home and look in the mirror and say, what did I learn today that I didn't know this morning? And if you give a chance to think about it, it's like, you'll try to learn something new every day. I know I still do it every day. I try to learn something new all the time. So we have a massive responsibility ahead of us. And those of us we've accepted the challenge of embracing our children and educating our children. And I take us, even though I'm retired, but the only reason why I should say the only reason why I retired from education because I got hurt in the job. I was actually attacked by a student, but it doesn't necessarily stop me from working with the young people. I believe that our children are salvageable and worth the challenge. So I go out every day. Every day I'm out trying to do something to make sure that our children are learning something. So, but I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to hone in on what you mentioned. You picked up, I mentioned about the multiple intelligences, and Howard Gardner is absolutely the pioneer of the seven multiple intelligences, but actually it's about 9 or 10 right now. So there has been some added on. And when we talk about the state of education and the disparity gaps that continue to widen versus close, a part of the solution is the multiple intelligences, not just for the school systems, but as well as for parents, and not just for parents, but also community organizations that are working with youth or youth centered programs. And so the multiple intelligences are important because, as you spoke about, Dwayne, not in what we know in education as educators, and not just for youth, but also adults, not all individuals learn the same. For example, before I even knew what the seven intelligences were or who even Howard Gardner happened to be, I knew that I could pick up anything as long as I saw it. And so that makes me visual. I love hands-on. So body movement, kinesthetic, which is why I'm athletic. And I'm also an auditory learner. If I have to sit there through a long lecture, I'm zoned out. Now, mind you, I don't have ADHD, ADD, or any of that. But even sitting in front of my computer, I'm surfing the web when I'm supposed to be doing something else. But if you show it to me, if I'm hearing it, and if it's hands on, and if I'm seeing it, I'm going to pick it up right away. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't comprehend long and short term passages, but I absorb it better. I can process it better, and it makes sense to me when those three aspects of the learning curve is introduced to me. But what we're also finding, Dwayne, as you know, as an educator, and I want you to hone on it a little bit, is that when our community organizers may not know the intelligences or are teaching to it or adapting their model to include that, or if teachers are highly overwhelmed, because we know that this academic school year, we've seen such a huge shortage in certified teachers, and not just a shortage in certified teachers, but there is an unprecedented amount of substitute teachers that are not qualified in the classrooms that may not be familiar with the multiple intelligences and the best way that students learn. How do you think that we could find a way for people to understand, one, not all students learn the same, but two, and I know the curriculums, under the Maryland State curriculum, I know that adaptation to learning is there, but how can it be honed on a little so that students' gaps are not widened but closed, and less students are left behind in the curve as they get ready for the real world?
Well, that's a good question, but I believe too this. With educators, let me say this. I'm gonna go back because I started off as a substitute teacher. I came in through an intern. I started off as a sub and then entered the intern program by the grace of God. And I went to a summer school program where I took 5 classes, and then I became an intern with the school district of Philadelphia, where I eventually was asked to take like a certain number of classes just to get certified. But I took it a step further and started. I was going to get a master's degree in elementary education. But I found out that there are teachers that are uncertified, or people who are subs or working in the classroom that are uncertified, that are actually better teachers than some of these so-called certified educators. I'm sorry. I've been in classrooms where I've seen people trying to teach a lesson, much like you said. I'm in there, we have these expository teachers who are teaching a lesson to teachers. And they talking the entire time. There's no interaction. All you're doing is sitting there listening to somebody. And like you, I'm zoned out. I'm like, okay, you just talk too much. And then they talk in a monotone way of talking. It's like, say, okay, You need to inflect or change the way you're talking. But I found out that if we have teachers that come in and tailor make their lesson plans to incorporate these multiple intelligences, as you indicated, Howard Gardner was the originator or you initiated it, but you said there are other books that I read that said they're up to like 9 multiple intelligence, and we know that children learn differently. We have to look at each child as an educator, a classroom instructor, look at each of our students and make sure that we're engaging them pretty much on the outcomes of their, whether it be an oral examination, a a test, or whether it's a quiz. We have to find out where these child's deficiencies are, and more importantly, where their strengths are. And we have to look at their strengths to make sure that we're hitting on their strengths. So we want to make sure that every child, when they walk out your classroom at the end of each report period, have gathered or been able to acquire all the learning they need to learn for that reporting period. Because you understand too that at the near 3/4 of this of the academic year, you're going to be expected to take a state standardized examination, which is going to be a true, not a true, because I don't think they're really accurate, but it's going to be an indicator of the child's learning capacity. And I just don't believe that that should be used so strongly, because there are children who have strength that may not be good at math, but they know their math. They may not be the best readers, but they can read. But there are children that have other skills where they're great artists. You know, they can measure a building out. They can do like they have other skills, because we know that every child is not going to go to college. But what we have to do is, as educators, is maximize the students we have before us, their skills, to get assurance that when they leave your class, when they leave Dr. Dorsey's class, they're going to say, you know what, that was Dr. Dorsey was a good teacher. I have a great, I call myself an educator. I ain't call myself a teacher, because I want people to learn that when they come in my class, I'm offering lifelong learning. Not just for, I don't want you to just walk away learning geometry if that's what I'm teaching that year, or algebra, or if that's what I'm teaching, or even how to conjugate a sentence. I'm going to be saying, look, or conjugate a verb. I'm going to be saying, let's make sure that that child learns everything they need to learn, so they go into adulthood, they're best prepared for the life ahead of them. So again, getting back to that multiple intelligence, we need to make sure that the people coming into the classrooms to teach our children understand that everybody doesn't learn the same way. So there must be a program prior to the beginning of every academic period that teachers are taught that, look, when you go to your classrooms and you write your lesson plans, make sure your lesson plans are written and designed to embrace all these different multiple intelligences, because everybody, there's no cookie cutter approach to instruction, and certainly no cookie cutter approach to learning. Okay?
Yes, absolutely. And there is no cookie cutter way, no one best way to skin a cat, become a leader, or to teach our youth. But I do want to make it real clear that this show, myself and my guests are absolutely supportive of the school systems. We are educators. I'm an educator of 30 years. Dwayne is an educator of 30 years. But we're just talking about what's happening in today's society when it comes to education. And I love the example that you used, Dwayne, that if those that are listening to this segment of this interview, if you are a person in a position of influence that have impact or reach to substitutes, hey, one consideration that you may not have thought of already is to help those potential substitutes or the current substitutes about the multiple ways in which students learn, because unfortunately that's not a criteria to become a substitute. Right now the school system just need bodies. So you could have a GED, and with no background, and apply to be a substitute, and most likely you will get picked up, right? However, the more that they become acclimated to the environment and the students that they will teach, the better off that it becomes a win-win and not a lose-lose. And one population we didn't talk about as we're talking about teaching approaches and learning styles are our students in special ed, whether they have ADD, ADHD, autism, 504, IEP. And when we're bringing in substitutes or even mainstream teachers to make sure that they're trying to close these gaps as much as possible, that is an uphill battle. And it's not one that can be solved in this discussion, but I would love to hear your take on that population. Hey, let me just add on, right? I'm gonna bring it back down. In education, there are three levels to students outside of the special education arena. You have high achieving students that are most likely AP honors, gifted and talented. You have students that fall average, right in the middle, straight line. They can go high or low depending on where their grades fall. And then we have an underserved population, which, due to variables outside of them, for some reason or another, in the educational arena, is just not clicking. And understanding those three populations to students, K-12 and higher ed, Dwayne, what are also some strategies that you could offer with your background in education that could absolutely help the listening audience, or maybe have a positive influence to transformational change regarding assisting these students?
Well, a lot of I have to say that my first job as an educator, my first appointment was at a seventh grade at-risk class. And again, I came out of accounting. I was in a business major. I was auditing hospitals and nursing homes prior to coming into education. And they sent me in a special in a at-risk class. I didn't know what at-risk really meant. So when I was talking to some, and I used to always like to add too, is that one of the seventh grade girls was pregnant with triplets, and one had just delivered twins. And also, it's a 98% poverty area. But what I found out was these children were not really at risk. They were just children that were underserved, as you indicated. And through the process, all these children wanted. When I found a way to heal a lot of those that children was just to demonstrate to the children that you care. Children acknowledge like any other beings and know when you care. And if you care about the children and you demonstrate that concern for their general welfare, and they love it and they love it, and they'll pretty much do a lot of what you ask. And if you keep on pushing that concern, they will do almost everything you ask them to do. And I do know that I'm still friends with a lot of children that I started off in that seventh grade class on their Facebook friends of mine. And we talk every now and again. And I met them back in 1994. So what it is that I think that as educators, as people that go before other people, we have to be willing to care about the people that we engage on a daily basis. Because if you give an attitude, if like a teacher told me one time when I was in undergraduate school, I got my, not told me, but she told it to a class. And she was basically failing a lot of us in a French class. And she said, I got mine. Now you need to get yours. I don't care whether you get yours or not, but I got mine. And I realized that even though I had no desire to become an educator, I knew then that I would never, ever, ever say that to anybody what I ever stood before and tried to educate. So over the years, the 34 plus years I worked as an educator, I realized that it was incumbent upon me to be a caring, loving kind of a person. Even even though some of the children made it very difficult, I realized that once I did it, if I won them over, it would be the job was a lot easier. So when you have the underserved community and you have the so-called special ed children, and I also like to say that I think a lot of our special ed children are improperly labeled. I think that whenever a child is perceived as problematic, or if there's a teacher doesn't understand their different cultural values, and they label them as special ed because they don't go along with the norm. We have to come to realize that there's really no norm when it comes to educating children, because if you have a different bunch of students from different social economic backgrounds and other various cultural means, then there's going to be a lot of different values. And we as educators need to make sure we do the appropriate research to find out how to best reach those children on those different levels. Because nobody in that classroom is going to be exactly the same, no matter what community you're in. There's always going to be different students, but they have to be reached on different levels. So I try to tell teachers, look, when you walk into a classroom, each one you have 33 children in your classroom, as we do sometime in Philadelphia, make sure you get to know them. As a matter of fact, Dr. Dorsey, I'd like to add this. When I was teaching before beginning every year, I would have children do a autobiography. And what it was, they would do a written autobiography, and they would do a media presentation. Okay, they would do a board, and they would put pictures on it where they could explain what they've done, a visual aid of sort. And I guess now you can do it on a computer because of all the different approaches we had. But the bottom line is the children would do that, and it was a chance for myself to get to know the child to get to know me, other children get to know one another. They learn about each other, and then what we do is we use those opportunities to get come to know one another a lot better. And then I would learn about the children. So I thought that was a good approach. So that's what I would do.